You are listening to the Prepared Warrior Podcast, where law enforcement and military trainers discuss cutting-edge training, tactics, and technology. Here is your host, John Wilson.
Welcome to Season 1, Episode 4 of the Prepared Warrior. I'm John Wilson. Our guest for this episode is Larry Mackinnon. I like to start every episode with a quote. This one is from Tim Kennedy, who said, "If the day ever comes that you have to fight for your life, the only thing that will determine the outcome is if you ever trained and prepared for that fight." All right, my guest for this episode is Larry Mackinnon. He has been with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police for the past 21 years and a diver with the RCMP recovery team for the past 16 years, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, International Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Federation World Masters gold medalist at blue belt and brown belt, assistant instructor at Gracie Humaita, Winnipeg.
Yeah, that's it.
And owner and instructor at Buffalo Jiu-Jitsu. Thanks so much for joining me today, Larry.
Thanks for having me.
So first, I wanted to talk about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's a big thing for you now, and you started training. I heard, I guess, later in life. What made you decide to start training?
I started training at 35 years old, which is kind of an old man to start.
Well, that's my age, exactly. I should start now, I guess.
Yeah, you should. How I started was a friend of mine, his name is Dave. He's a police officer as well. Dave's not a very big guy. I probably outweighed him by about 60, 70 pounds at the time. He says, "Hey, you want to come try grappling with our friend Paul?" And I knew Paul. So I come down and I try it out, and my friend Dave, who I'm much bigger and stronger than, and if you just look at us and you had to guess who'd win a fight, it would probably be me. But no, Dave beat me up.
Wow.
And it wasn't because he was especially good at jiu-jitsu. He was just he's a scrappy guy, and I realized that my size and my weight, my strength advantage is not so much of an advantage because Dave he's a very goal-oriented guy.
Okay,
so he's actually a very strong purple belt right now.
So it was an eye-opening thing for you, and then
yeah, exactly.
And then that got you more motivated too.
Yeah, at the time I was about 265 pounds, and I kind of realized like I was getting uncomfortable laying on the couch, and now I'm getting beat up by my buddy, and so I started seeing a trainer, and the goal was get in shape for jiu-jitsu because I hated coming to class. I'd roll for 5 minutes, take a 30-second break, roll for 5 minutes, and then I was done for the day. I wanted to keep rolling, keep learning, keep going. So started losing weight, started eating better, started training more outside of jiu-jitsu, and as I say, I got the bug to train.
So how would you describe Brazilian jiu-jitsu as a martial art? Like, how is it different from others to people who don't know much about it?
Well, if you look at sports like martial arts like taekwondo or karate, they're based on a lot of patterns and movements. But one of the biggest problems with those martial arts, as well as boxing and kickboxing, is you could learn these techniques, but you can't employ them at full speed with a training partner. If you're boxing and you punch your training partner in the head as hard as you can, you're going to give him a concussion, and then you're going to have no one who wants to train with you. And it's the same with taekwondo. You can't kick your training partner in the head. But jiu-jitsu, because there's no real impacts to your body, it's just joint manipulation, weight and pressure and techniques. You can go like 99% with your training partner. And as long as you're responsible and you don't crank a submission on, and as long as your partner is responsible and knows when he's caught and he taps, no one's going to get hurt. You can go 100% against your training partner. He taps, you reset, you go again. You can't do that with, say, Muay Thai kickboxing, because you kick your training partner 2-3 times, he's not going to want to play anymore.
Right.
So yeah. I think that's where the realism for jiu-jitsu comes in, because you can honestly see if it works. And we always talk about there's no egos in jiu-jitsu. Like, you walk in the room, you know who's better, you know where you fit in the food chain, and everybody's cool about it, and so you can train as hard as you can, and as long as you're tapping at the right time, you can keep training as hard as you can.
So that would you say is the main advantage for learning this in combination as a police officer?
Yeah, I never, like I was a police officer. I started in 1997. Then I started jiu-jitsu in 2010. So for 13 years, all I did was what they taught me in depot. And I came to, after learning some more jiu-jitsu, I realized, man, there's a lot of advantages just knowing how to apply weight and pressure and angles, and applying it under like full speed with training partners. Had I known a lot of this stuff back when I first started in policing, I probably could have saved myself a lot of headache, a lot of injury to me and people I had to deal with. Just not knowing how to deal with somebody properly to apply weight to hold them down. If I'd known that back then, I think I would have made my life a lot easier, a lot safer too.
Right. So can you compare a situation where you needed to use physical force before you started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and then maybe a situation like after you learned it?
Yeah, I can remember specific incidences of holding people down, guys fighting. And quite often when someone's fighting with me, they're not fighting to beat me up. They're fighting to get away.
Right.
They don't want to go to jail. Mm-hmm. So I'd hold them down, but I'd use my arms to try to hold them down. Now, even though I was bigger, my arms are not going to be stronger than their legs, their core, and their arms. Because if they're laying on their belly and they get their knees and their hands under them, we call it building a house. They're going to get them under them, and they're going to stand up, and then the fight's back on. Then I got to take them down again. And that's when I'm holding them down with just my arms. In jiu-jitsu, we always use the term heavy hips. So if I just push my hip into them and I got my head up, my chest up, my hips forward, my knees straight, I'm basically, if you just think about the math of the PSI, all my weight is being pushed through one small spot on my hip. So he's got to deal with all this weight. And again, if I let a guy go to his belly, he builds a house, he stands up. But if I keep a guy on his back, it's much harder to get up when you're laying flat on your back. So if I just hold a guy down, hold him there for a minute, 2 minutes, take the fight out of him, wait for my backup, then it would be a lot less up and down. Because I remember situations of holding a guy down. He gets back up. I sweep his legs, take him back down. And then he gets up again. Right. Now he's getting tired. I'm getting tired. It's just like, okay, who's going to get more tired first?
Right, yeah. And would you say now, do you have coworkers who see your technique and then they might wonder like, oh, is this a more advantageous way to restrain someone or in a situation?
You know what? I at work, I put up on the bulletin board free training opportunities for police.
Right.
At Gracie Humaita, I run a law enforcement only class. So the only people in the room are law enforcement, corrections, and military personnel. And I tell them, excuse me, I tell them, class is free. Come on out. You're going to learn some great stuff. Going to save your life, make you hard to kill. And a couple guys have taken me up and they've come out. And one quote I love from one of the guys, his name is John. He says, after about 5 classes, he said to me, "Man, I didn't realize how vulnerable I was."
Oh yeah.
So he thought that he had all the tools he needed in his toolbox, but he didn't realize that there are better tools to deal with people. And if somebody has better tools than him, they're going to beat him. Mm-hmm. So
you think it's good for like offensive and defensive things where say you're going after someone, but also if they're coming at you? Yeah,
like if you're arresting somebody, it's not very often that somebody actually wants to fight me to beat up a cop, quote unquote.
Sure. Yeah.
More often it's try to get away. So it's like, you got to grab onto them. You got to take them to the ground. You got to apply weight to them and pressure to them. Mm-hmm. And then you got to get the handcuffs on them. And you can't just be ripping their arms in different directions, because when you start injury, if you're applying pain to get an arm behind someone's back, they may comply. But if you're torquing their arm the wrong way, like if you're just breaking their arm, they're going to fight even harder. So just learning the proper way to get someone's hands behind their back, or the proper way to control somebody, there's so much, your job will just be so much easier.
So getting into your policing career, well, so where have you worked as a member of the RCMP? We mentioned that you do the diving team, which I know there's probably not many takedowns in the diving team, but it's a completely different skill. But so where has your career taken you?
Started in '97. I went to God's Lake Narrows. It's a small flying reserve, northern Manitoba. Worked there for 2 years. Then I went to Cross Lake, another it's actually one of the biggest reserves in Manitoba. Did 2 years there. Then I went to Selkirk. From Selkirk, I did fly-ins, Barons, Bloodvein, Poplar River. I did municipal in Selkirk for 1 year, and then the fly-ins for 3 years. Then from there, I went back up north. I went to Norway House, did a year there, then got promoted, went up back to Cross Lake and did 3 years there. Then I came south and I did 3 years in customs and excise, and now I'm in federal serious organized crime. But the spots I worked up north, they all had between 1,500 and 2,000 prisoners a year. So God's Lake was a 5-person spot. Cross Lake was a 5-person spot the first time I was there. It was a 13-person spot the second time I went back. But we were arresting people almost every day. Granted, most of them are highly intoxicated and you just need to kind of guide them to the truck to get them in. But there was some level of force, whether it was I had a few fights where they actually wanted to beat me up. Several fights where they're trying to get away. Most of them were just trying to corral them towards the truck to get them in, get them falling. So yeah, knowing the jiu-jitsu I know now, it would have helped me so much back then with just those high prisoner counts. You just can't argue with when you're arresting over 1,000 people in a year. You're arresting like 3-4 people a day on average. So
you would advise, especially if someone's early in their career, it might be a good skill to learn when you're in a small community where there's not much backup, I guess.
Yeah, one of the problems with the RCMP is there's a lot of situations where members will work alone, or they'll be alone in their detachment area, but they'll have backup assigned to them. But their backup might be anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour away, depending on geographic size.
Right.
So, like a lot of the videos you see on Instagram, YouTube, where they're fighting with the cops, if you could just control the guy long enough for your partner to get there,
right?
Like that's huge. So some of the techniques I teach a guy to go from a position of advantage, stay there. If you get into a position of disadvantage, like say you're knocked down and the guy's on top of you, how to go from that bad spot back to an advantageous spot and either control the guy or disengage and go to one of your tools. I don't teach guys to go to pepper spray in this situation or taser in that situation. You got to follow the rules of your department, whatever they give you.
Right.
But I'll give a guy the tools to go from laying on the bottom with a guy on top of you to getting to an advantage, and now you decide what you want to do.
So you mentioned your Instagram and how you show kind of police training techniques, and that's out of Buffalo Jiu-Jitsu. So is that where you're an instructor, right?
Yeah. So Buffalo Jiu-Jitsu is not so much location; it's more of an idea, I guess.
Okay.
I train out at Gracie Humaita. Daniel Cobb's the head instructor there. I assist him with some of the classes here and there when he needs. I instruct the law enforcement class on Sundays. Now, one problem like I noticed on social media, there's lots of videos of real situations of cops getting into scuffles and shootings and things like that, but there's nothing really showing you in this particular situation, this is what is going to work for you. Like just like a headlock escape. Your basic, the bully grabs you in a headlock and holds you on the ground. Well, he's going to hold you there as long as he wants, unless you know how to get out. So I'm putting out videos on the Instagram page. It's not a comprehensive instructional video, but it's an exposure of what you can do to get out of that situation. And for people who are in the Winnipeg area or visiting Winnipeg, I tell them there's free training for police corrections, military in this stuff. So I'm just trying to get the what's the word I'm looking for? Get the word out to other cops. Say, hey, we got training in depot, we got training at the police academy, but there's more training to be had.
Yeah, on your Buffalo Jiu-Jitsu Instagram, you say police defensive tactics will better prepare you to do your job. Training in sport jiu-jitsu will make you better at police defensive tactics. You've been talking about how it is a benefit, but any more elaboration on that kind of specific statement?
See, like when I started, I started doing sport jiu-jitsu, and that's what I fell in love with. That's my first passion, is the sport jiu-jitsu. But there are so many concepts in sport jiu-jitsu that translate seamlessly over to police defense tactics. Certain techniques, not so much. So there's a technique called berimbolo. It's where you roll over your own shoulder and you flip your opponent over and then you take his back. That looks awesome when you're doing sport jiu-jitsu. Looks awesome in tournaments. When you land it on the mat with your partner, everyone gives a little bit of a cheer because it looks cool. Yeah. But you would never do that in police work. I'd never roll over my shoulder if I could avoid it in police work. But the concept of let's say underhooks, in sport jiu-jitsu, you want to get underhooks where I get like my arm under his arm so that his arm is going to be elevated. So that concept is a sport jiu-jitsu technique. You use it all the time in numerous positions, but also in police work. If you were going to come at me, the first thing I do is I get underhooks. That way my arms are under your arms. Your arms are up in the air. You can't reach my gun or my pepper spray. It's harder for you to do that. And then I can easily take your back. And once I have your back, it's going to be easier for me to take you down. So that concept you learn in sport jiu-jitsu, it translates seamlessly over into police defense tactics. And when you start thinking about reps, I heard somewhere a long time ago that it takes 3,000 reps to make something muscle memory. So I don't know if that's accurate or not, but it sounds pretty good to me. 3,000,
that seems like a lot, but I mean, I guess you can knock down a few hundred every day.
And you know what? And if you're doing it once it becomes that muscle memory, that's when you're not even thinking about it. So if I get into a situation where I'm having to arrest somebody and we have to fight, because I've done underhooks thousands of times in sport jiu-jitsu, it's just instinct. Boom! I take the underhooks on him. The person I'm dealing with. So that's where, if you train at sport jiu-jitsu, those underlying concepts are going to translate right over into police defense tactics. An omoplata or a berimbolo is not going to translate right over.
Right.
They look cool, but they're just not going to work for police work.
And how important do you think the physical fitness is in relation to police defensive tactics?
That goes right back to when I first started, because when I first started, like I said, I would roll for 2 5-minute rounds and I'd be so gassed and I just couldn't keep training. So I got in better physical shape so that I could do sport jiu-jitsu more. And I think we, as police officers, it's our responsibility to be in a certain level of physical fitness. One of the guys I work with calls it being a tactical athlete. If you're not in good shape, then I'm letting, if my partner is in a fight with somebody and I'm too gassed to fight by the time I get there, I've let him down. And if he gets hurt, I've let his family down. And if that person hurts someone else, I've let the public down. And if I get hurt, now I've let my family down. So there's a lot of people relying on us to be in a certain level of physical fitness. No one says you have to run Ironmans, but you have to be in a certain level of physical fitness, because it's not just the public relying on us in that specific situation, but how are you going to tell your kids, I got hurt at work and I'll never walk again, or whatever the situation is,
right? Because
I chose not to exercise and I chose to eat poorly.
Right. So it's responsibility of the job, essentially.
Yeah.
And so what would you say is the most important lesson law enforcement can gain from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
I think that they can learn that when you're doing jiu-jitsu, you're getting into better physical shape. Number one, you're learning techniques that are going to assist you in keeping yourself safe, your partner safe, and the public. Like the guy you're arresting, everyone I've ever arrested, I don't want to hurt them. I have to get them under control so they'll stop hurting someone else or me, but I don't want to hurt them. So if you learn jiu-jitsu, you learn proper application of technique and weight, and once you get into that situation of arresting somebody, and you have those tools in your toolbox, you're just going to be better at your job, and just everyone all around is going to be safer when you're better at police defense tactics.
So if you've piqued some people's interest, what would be the advice for someone who's just starting jiu-jitsu training or a similar martial art?
Well, I always say that, actually, I get people asking me, I want my kid to start jiu-jitsu. And I tell them, well, what do you have available? If all you have available is taekwondo in your area, then put him in taekwondo, because something is better than nothing. If you have the opportunity to take jiu-jitsu, that's the one I think is going to be the most effective for your job. So when people ask, when new police officers, I tell them, you know what, watch the videos, get a training partner, get somebody like-minded. Yeah, you can't, maybe you don't have a jiu-jitsu gym in your area, but just some of the things with a partner, you can figure that out and get a little bit better at it. If all you have is a Muay Thai or a kickboxing gym in your area, take that. Anything is better than nothing. But of course, if you have the opportunity to choose, jiu-jitsu would be my first choice, judo, and wrestling. Like those are the ones that go full speed, where you know if it works or not.
And what would you say to someone who say is just starting policing? What would be some advice just in that, something for them to think about if they're just starting a career, or they're in cadets or something like that?
I still remember something my uncle, I had 3 uncles who were RCMP officers. Something he said to me when I graduated. He said, fear is your friend. If you're not afraid, then you're going to get hurt. If you're afraid, then you're going to be sharp, and you're going to be able to see things coming. So that would be like my best advice. If you start walking in cocky, someone's probably going to blindside you. But if there's a quote from, I think his name is General George Mattis, and the quote goes, be polite, be professional, but have a plan to kill everybody you meet. Now, as police officers, that's not a good quote for us.
Yeah.
I kind of modified it for myself. It's be polite, be professional, but have a plan to deal with everybody you meet. So I would tell people, when you meet somebody, just assume everybody has an ulterior motive. Assume that even the accused person, he might just want to get away. The victim or the witness, they might want to lie to you, but maybe they're going to be mad at you. Maybe they're going to want to hit you. So just as you deal with everybody, just be polite and be professional, but just be not fearful, but just be cognizant that if, like right now, if you wanted to hit me, could you hit me? No, we got a table in the way. Yeah. So just things like that. Just that's going to give you that reactionary gap, how to deal with people. Because at the end of the day, if the situation goes bad that you're in, you can explain what you did, why you felt a certain way. But if you don't survive the situation, then there's no explaining or telling anybody what happened. So first concern, a little bit of fear is good. Keep you sharp. Have a plan whenever you're dealing with somebody, but just always have that mindset, that survival mentality. I got to survive. I got to get home to my family. And I got to tell my boss what happened. If I ended up having to use a taser or a gun, right. I got to tell somebody what happened. So I got to live.
We've talked a lot about kind of use of force situations, and are there specific situations you would encourage officers not to engage physically with a subject that they might be considering whether that's the right idea at the time?
Well, your decision to use force, that's going to be solely based on you personally. So if you and I walked into a situation and we're let's say there's a guy who's doesn't want to leave and he puts up his dukes, he wants to fight. So based on my experience, 21 years policing, I've used taser in the past. It's worked very well. I've used pepper spray in the past. It's worked about 50% of the time. I've used my baton. Didn't work very well at all. I've been in numerous physical altercations at work, and I've been in probably thousands of physical altercations just training, just with my training partners.
Right.
Maybe you're new on the job. Maybe you've never had to use the taser yet. Maybe you've used pepper spray. So you're making your decision based on what you think. I'm making my decision based on my experiences. Now, I might be bigger than the guy, so I'm not going to use any tools. He puts up his dukes. I personally might step in, grab him, put him on the ground, and then cuff him. You, based on having, we'll call it, less tools in the toolbox, you may decide, you know what, I'm going to shoot this guy with the taser, because that way he's just going to 5 seconds and call it the ride for 5. He goes down, and then we get the cuffs on him. So I always tell guys when I'm training them, I say, whatever decision you make, whether you keep applying pressure or whether you totally disengage and go to a tool, that's your decision, completely up to you. So I tell guys right up front, I'm not a taser instructor, a pepper spray instructor. So you really have to think about what are your assets, and I call it your assets and liabilities. So my assets are, I'm heavy, 230 pounds, tall guy. I'm pretty good at the jiu-jitsu thing.
Right.
My liabilities, I'm not very fast. So I'm not you get a guy who takes off running. I may or may not catch him. So that's one of my liabilities. You might be a fast runner, but depending on your lack of fighting experience, that might be one of your liabilities. So I tell guys, take an honest look at yourself. What are your assets, your liabilities? What is your experience? And if you get into a situation where you have to use force, you gotta just give yourself that honest, no shit assessment of where I'm at, and then just make your decision based on that. So, would I tell somebody, oh, in this situation you should taser, in this situation you should fight? I'd never say that. I'd say, based on your experience, what do you think you should do?
Yeah, what's most comfortable, and what are your skills?
Yeah.
And so, would you say martial arts training is prevalent in the law enforcement community, or I know you're always advocating more, but do you think it's a lot of people do it, or?
Unfortunately, no.
No.
I think that with police officers, you get your training in the police academy and depot. You might do a refresher every in the RCMP. It's every 3 years. We're kind of given this idea that, okay, what you know, this is like in the RCMP and depot, people come from around the world to see how the Royal Canadian Mounted Police do their training. So you're kind of given this false idea that everything you know is good. You took the training here, now you're good to go and have a good career of 25 to 35 years. But in reality, things are changing all the time. More and more people are training in MMA. So there's not enough training. Like for example, if you're doing your refresher every 3 years, you're not actually getting into a fight with anybody, like where you're having to like really physically arrest somebody and control them. You're going through the motions of this is what you would do, then you do this situation. So people continue with that false idea that they're good, but there's a few cops. There's a couple cops from Winnipeg City that I train with, Will and Rob. They've trained martial arts for years, and they're very good. But I only know a handful of city guys who come train. Like, I think I probably know about 10 or 12 guys. I think they have over 1,000 police officers in the greater Winnipeg area. We must have over 600 RCMP officers just that are close to the city. I think I only have about 10 or 12 who actually come train. So there's opportunity for them to train. They're just not doing it, and I guess they've gotten by so far so good in their careers. But it has to be more. Like it has to be. I think the RCMP used to do something called French language training. They'd send a guy off to Montreal for 6 months to learn French. My buddy Paul says, well, they should have sent them to Brazil for 6 months to get a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, because I've needed jiu-jitsu far, far more often in my career than I've needed a second language.
Well, that's a perfect spot to end the interview. I just wanted to, I guess, remind people that you're offering free training for law enforcement. That's, I guess they would contact you, Buffalo Jiu-Jitsu on Instagram, or is there other ways that if someone's interested, they could get involved with that?
You know what? The best way would be, I know not everyone's on social media, but the best way would be on Instagram at Buffalo Jiu-Jitsu. On Facebook as well, there's it's at Buffalo Jiu-Jitsu as well on Facebook. There'll be a Buffalo Jiu-Jitsu website coming soon, but you can go through the direct message through Facebook or Instagram. That'd be the best way to get a hold of me. If you have any questions about training, if you're just thinking about doing it and you need that little nudge, like I got no problem texting back and forth, phone call, coffee, just explain the benefits to. If one cop can train and one cop can say down the road, yeah, I got into a fight and this is how I dealt with it. Like that's amazing. Like that would be so satisfying to hear that it's working for people.
All right, thanks so much for coming on. This was great.
Thank you.
This has been the Prepared Warrior Podcast. For more info on our guests or other episodes, check out thepreparedwarrior.com. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas for the Prepared Warrior Podcast, email jon@thepreparedwarrior.com.